Carbon13's podcast, Climate Takes. On this episode, it's all about synthetic biology. I'm delighted to be joined by Manu and Tim of Deep Blue Biotech for the podcast. And we are going to be looking at their takes on synthetic biology, the industries which use synthetic biology, and those that will, and what it will take to use these innovations to fight the climate emergency.
We're coming at the crossroads of a major revolution that is going to change almost everything we know. If you take the bioeconomy as a whole, it's like a trillion industry. Like we're talking, I think it was like 6.5 trillion, because there is pharma, there is fuels, there is mining, there is fashion, there is personal care, there is food.
When we first started researching this, they were a very large corporation, and they said, we would rather work with 50 early stage tech startups who, spread our risk, hopefully one of them comes off, than have 5 in-house projects that cost us a fortune that might not work.
We do this not because it's easy, but because we thought it would be easy.
Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I think first off, what does Deep Blue Biotech do, and what are you producing?
Manu, do you want to take that one?
Well, we are a synthetic biology startup. We are using cyanobacteria specifically, which is a blue-green algae that we engineer in order to make green chemicals or alternatives to the existing chemicals that we have today. We have started with hyaluronic acid as our beachhead product, but we are looking at the wider chemical industry to address that. So we use synthetic biology and computational models in order to accelerate the discovery process. And what we envision is a world that we can actually, recreate the building blocks of the economy in a much more sustainable way. Let's just as a reminder, because I just went through cyanobacteria, is an algae, therefore, what we are using to create those chemicals is CO2. We're just taking CO2 and transforming that CO2 into useful materials.
And we're going to dive into your beachhead, because basically you're a chemicals company, right? We're going to dive into your beachhead and why you're attacking that first. But I also know that you are trying to scale up to butanol, which would be a holy grail of producing that at scale and at cost. Could you just give me an idea of how big the markets are for both hyaluronic acid and what it's used for, and butanol as well?
But it's a very good question, I would say. The hyaluronic acid question is much more straightforward. It's a 15 billion market. The uses there are it goes from pharma, medical uses, as injectables, as for joints and very specific uses, to more the cosmetic industry, some sorts of nutraceutical. So you have a very consolidating market. Is usually, in particularly the beauty industry, ingredients go through cycles. So hyaluronic acid is one of those ingredients that are always on trend or finding new ways to go into trend. Now, butanol is one. We started there, and when we say we want to eventually go there, what we are actually saying is we want to be as cost effective as we can tackle very cheap chemicals. Butanol being one of those examples. Now, the market for butanol in itself is around 4 billion. It's not a massive market. Why? Because it's not used to, replace fuels, for example, that could be potentially at one of the end-up uses that we can find for that specific chemical. So if we actually manage to do that transition, that would be very interesting, but we need to be extremely cost-effective. There's a couple of orders of magnitude between what we can do with hyaluronic acid and what happens with butanol. But eventually, we want to create an operating system that can deliver on that. I don't know, Tim, if you want to also build on that.
No, the only thing to add is there is a sizable graveyard of synthetic biology companies who've gone straight at the commodity chemicals problem and failed, because it takes them years and years to get to the point where they're competitive. Eventually, the investors get bored and pull the plug, and the company fails and never gets anywhere. So we took the view, especially with money being a lot tighter now than it used to be, that we needed to show that we could make the company commercially viable as quickly as possible with generating profits. And the best way to do that was to target the higher value chemicals ingredients first.
What's the difference in price between butanol and hyaluronic acid?
We're
Butanol is
talking,
about $2 a litre, and hyaluronic acid is north of $2,000 per kilogram.
So that's 2 versus 2,000.
So
yeah.
to be competitive, you can do the one much quicker than you can do the other. But you do the one, you improve the technology, and as the technology improves and scales, then you can start to work your way down the pyramid through the lower value items. And there's a whole list of items that we can get our teeth into.
Yeah, I'm bearing in mind also that we started the Blue with this, more long-term vision that we wanted to regenerate the planet. Like thinking sustainability in general had gone to an end. So like just stopping what we are doing won't be enough. We need to start reverting the effects of what we have already done. So this technology fit into that. And at the same time, we are very conscious. Well, we are not going to save this planet. Obviously, we are not going to save it in general, but specifically, we are not going to save it with hyaluronic acid. Like it's not going to happen like that. It's going to happen through a myriad of different chemicals that we want to get into that space. But as you said at the beginning, there is a tension there between how long it will take to us to get to that price competitiveness. And the longer it takes, regardless of what a venture-backed company needs to deliver to their own investors, is when the people, consumers, are going to be exposed to the benefits of the new technologies that are coming in. Or they were going to be in the lab, no one is seeing them, they're just going through iterations to reach that cost competitiveness, or we can actually expose them to, hey, we can actually deliver high functionality, cost effectiveness, and great products now. I think that the journey of selecting these industries is part of the cost. We are going to be competitive faster, but also get people to engage with these technologies. Now, it doesn't look like, okay, this is in the future, it's only in the pharma industry. It's something that happens in the everyday.
I'm going to dive deeper into that point in just a second. What is synthetic biology? What about it is synthetic? And what is it replacing that therefore makes it better for the climate?
What synthetic biology in general as a field is, we do genetic engineering of organisms. So we alter somehow the biology of existing organisms to do things that we want them to do. So any organism, a bacteria, yeast, a cyanobacteria in our case, an algae, they use the food, the elements they get, in order to transform that into useful elements for their own subsistence. In the case of algae or cyanobacteria, they use CO2 and sand. Other ones will use different sources of sugar. What synthetic biology allows us to do is to edit some of those elements. I'm just going very simplistic because they are the two non-super technical guys in this call. But in order for us, we can edit that, so we can change the way they manufacture things internally to manufacture something that is of interest to us. What we do is to change the metabolic pathways. If they get sugar to make a cake, we say, okay, let's get sugar to make a cookie because we want cookies. At the end of the day, we're changing that metabolism in a way that that allows us to create something else. Why we need other models and why we use computational models and other tools is running those experiments. It's super slow. It takes ages to just say, okay, I'm going to change this specific metabolic pathway into that, and let's see what happens. So what we can do is model some of those metabolic pathways in order to predict, or at least have more strong theories of what is going to happen, and therefore then go and conduct the experiments that are more closer to what we want to do. So that's how you reduce the time of experimentation. But synthetic biology in general is, really editing life in a way that can produce things that are useful for us. Why this is important to climate? Because many of the things we want those organisms to produce are things that are now produced by unsustainable sources. So what we want them to do is, okay, choose whatever is now done from fossil fuels or really rare resources that are scarce, or in the case, in our case, less sustainable pathways. We can do it in a way that is more sustainable. Therefore, when that becomes the main way of doing things, we are abating those emissions that were there before.
So, an analogy might be you're a farmer and you're farming cows, and you're saying these cows are great at producing milk. I want better beef cattle. I'm able to use computational models to select for the cattle that will be optimized for producing the beef. Is that a relevant analogy?
Kind of. I think we go inside of the cattle to some extent. What we will do, the computational model, is to say, uh, I know point A. So point A means I know all of these different precursors, things that exist in these cells, are there, and I want to get to B. And there is, this more than the cows. It says is Google Maps. So you are in your house and you need to get to Cambridge. How I get there? And you can say I just go, but there's a zillion different ways to get there. What I'm asking them is to say what is the most effective way to get from my house to Cambridge, and how I do that. What are the where I turn, where I, etc. What this allows us to do is to say what are the metabolic engineering modifications you need to do in order to get to that. And that's kind of what the technology, synthetic biology in general, is based on. Once you find that, you need to scale, which is the other problem. But the first thing is to get the bacteria or the organisms you are working with to do what you want to do, and to that to be stable. Because if you're saying, okay, sit on the roof of the car, yeah, and that's the way you are going to get there. Well, eventually you may get uncomfortable, and then in biology may mean they mutate back. They don't like what we have done, so we need to first of all understand what we can do, how we are going to do it, and then make it in a way that the species, the organisms are going to embrace it to some extent and keep it as a modification that they can live with.
Your slime are your first customers. I love it. So, as a company, Deep Blue Biotech, then you're experimenting even with the way of doing experiments.
Yes, to an extent. We're definitely trying to do things differently. We've kept a close eye on what other companies have done before, what's worked and what's not, and we've tried to learn from that. I think that the use of computational models, obviously, it's AI. I think that's very popular elsewhere, but I don't know to what extent it's ever been applied to cyanobacteria before. One of the reasons for that is there wasn't enough good data. It's because some of our early research is generating good data, which is enabling us to use this to make predictions of, for example, how much carbon is going to be consumed by the cyanobacteria when it makes hyaluronic acid.
Okay. Let's dive back into the markets. Obviously, most women listening to this podcast will know what hyaluronic acid is used for, and it's quite an important ingredient in beauty products. What are the benefits of starting with that as a beachhead market, which may differ to other sectors which are still going to be using chemicals?
I think when we the first piece of research we did was to look at all the chemicals that our cyanobacteria could potentially make. It's quite a long list, which is very encouraging. We then took that list and we compared it to market sizes and price points. So the thing we liked about hyaluronic acid is the market is big, it's growing quickly, and as we discussed earlier, that price point is high. So that makes it particularly appealing as a place to start. The thing we're wary of, I think, is becoming known as a hyaluronic acid company, which is, we're a cyanobacteria company. This is just our first product, and all being well, it will be a very profitable one. But it moves us down that path of refining the technology so we can do others.
Yeah, so I worked roughly 20 years at Unilever, mostly product design, innovation, brand development in beauty and personal care. And my last role there, I was VP of sustainable design. I was just responsible of actually transforming, because obviously the company had very strong commitments on how they wanted to recreate the products to be much more eco-friendly and sustainable. And I had to work on packaging and formulation. And very early on in that journey, I noticed that there was not enough materials to that. There was not enough good materials. We were coming at the back of probably as the woman that know the hyaluronic acid is a very cool ingredient may remember also that roughly 10 years ago, the whole industry went nuts in everything is natural. Yeah, all products and all categories is going to be 99% natural. And then, sometime after that, they started to go back from that because the products were not efficacious. They were not working as well as they were working in the past. And people and consumers start to say, yeah, this is not for me to make this choice. You sort it out. But I want products that are sustainable and works equally or better than the ones that were working before. And I think that is when synthetic biology and these technologies allows us to create different ingredients, different formulas that can serve that purpose. That we can create a generation of new ingredients that can actually be functionally superior, but also sustainable and even cost effective as well. I think that's the perfect trifecta that Tim was describing before, but it's the important element of what we want to achieve today, which is how we get into this market with a competitive advantage. And I think that's kind of the important bit. But then the second step, as Tim was just mentioning, is algae in general is very good doing sugar. That's kind of that's how they store energy. They transform whatever they get into sugar, and they have many sugars. And the hyaluronic acid is a polysaccharide, is a disaccharide. So we have that we knew that they should have many of the precursors of this ingredient already in the metabolic pathways as they are today. So we knew that there was Tim used to use this analogy a lot. We like to push the car downhill rather than uphill. We are not asking the organism to do something that they're not used to do. We're just saying, well, you are doing something very similar to it. Now we just need to change a few things in order to get to this ingredient. And for us specifically, it allows us to have even further points of differentiation when it comes to our product because it's coming from ocean sources and it's ocean derived and all of that.
Because you referenced a point earlier, which is you want the end consumer to understand what has been involved in making this product. And so are you envisioning a future where a customer is browsing in Boots for a beauty product and knows that it's a good sign if it's made by Deep Blue Biotech as a brand or by cyanobacteria? Would that be where you're trying to get to?
I think there's some, first of all, we have already consumers taking the bottle and looking in the back what is there. Like that behavior is already happening. They're looking more for the absence of things than the presence of things. That they don't want some things to be on those products. Acknowledging how branding works, we don't expect this blue to be shouting in in a packaging of a skincare cream, but I think consumers will first of all understand that biotechnology is bringing the best of nature to them. It's trying to really enhance the properties, and that ingredients that are coming from these sources is going to be a proxy for good quality and functionality. Why I'm saying this? Because unfortunately, 10 years ago, it was a proxy for more expensive and less efficacious. We need to change that dramatically. Although these days probably is not the best character to quote, but if you look at the Tesla story, when you look at what an electric engine can do, is like they can send the power all at once to the engine. And what you can do with that, you can accelerate faster. So what Tesla did at some point is, I'm going to use the sustainability features of this specific technology and put it at the service of being functionally superior in something. In this case, speed. And they make a sports car. And they started to create a traction into, okay, that's cool. So I can go into that choice because it's cool, because it's fast, because it's sustainable, whatever. Because what I want is not people going to my choice because it's the most sustainable option. I want them to go for whatever reason. whether they want to navigate because it's cheaper, whether they want to go navigate because it's sustainable, because it works better, whatever. But I want more people using products that are going to make a good dent and in reverting the effects of climate change.
Well said, Manu. You've raised money, 800,000, I think was your last round, from some really respected investors, SFC Capital, for example, as well as Carbon13 itself, and Innovate UK grants as well. Why do you think these investors have chosen you?
I think it's potential. It's not as if right now we can show them steady revenue streams. But when you can show them something which A, can hopefully do the planet some good, and B, has the capacity to be a very, very profitable, very large company, that's quite a compelling proposition. I think the other aspect, a little bit blowing our own trumpet, is they liked the team. I think we have a good blend of skills and experience, and that gave them a degree of confidence that we weren't going to blow all of their money on something silly.
Yeah, I would add to that, Tim was mentioning before about that graveyard of failures in the past. Sometimes when adjusting an industry, you get it wrong. The margin of error is very, very, very big. Like once it was an error because they weren't there. When you look at biotechnology and synthetic biology specifically, now the margins of errors of what some companies have succeeded or not are getting slimmer and slimmer. So someone is going to get it right. So investors are seeing that one of this ecosystem of companies is going to actually go and start changing the chemical industry, the ingredient industry in general. And obviously they are just trying to diversify that bet between the technologies that are coming, whether it's more the traditional precision fermentation that is quite well established. We see now more algae derived that were more in the food space lately getting into this space. Companies like L'Oreal had invested in really invested a lot of money in biotech companies like Debu, or algae companies like Microfit. So they're really interested in this space. We notice that is happening. They have already made the commitments to have 95% in the case of L'Oreal, 100% in the case of Unilever of bio-based ingredients, biodegradable ingredients. So they need these technologies in order to fulfill those promises. So I think, and with those two players only, you make like 100 billion in revenue. So it's kind of a very interesting market to be in.
Do you know this? Would you hazard a guess at the size of the bioeconomy, or where it's predicted to grow to?
If you take the bioeconomy as a whole, it's like a trillion industry.
Yeah.
Like we're talking, I think it was like 6.5 trillion, because there is pharma, there is fuels, there is mining, there is fashion, there is personal care, there is food. So it's a very, very sizable story, because it goes from alternative meats to different ways of mining, to actually drug deliveries and everything that has happened in the pharma industry, to alternative materials, to fashion and alternative food for nutrition. So it's a very big promise. To be honest, it hasn't delivered yet. I think the only industry where you see that these technologies are already making a lot of real impact is in the pharma industry so far, because they're using this for some quite a good time now. But we know it's going to come. We start seeing now companies going into the right direction. So we believe that it's a matter of a couple of years on see who is going to go and try to consolidate the market as well.
I think that's what must have made it a really interesting investment case, is the fact that we've got a mega trend for an industry which is getting into the trillions, as you say, but also it's worth reiterating what you've already said, which is your technology is still really early stage, right?
Yeah.
TRL 3 or 4, I think you were saying. So technology readiness level for our listeners, it goes from like 0, 1 all the way up to 10, and 10 is like your laptop, like it's deployed and everybody's using it. Whereas 0 or 1 is like it's the most abstract research paper possible. So if you're at 3 or 4, you've actually got a long way to go through that journey at this point, which is why I think it's so. For my next question, why would you do this as entrepreneurs? and not try and be doing it in the R&D department of, say, Unilever or L'Oreal? And yeah, answer that question first.
I would say the way big companies in this space have been doing R&D has shifted dramatically. I started in the early 2000s working with them, and it was a very close, long-term cycles of innovation. So they would say, we are going to change this technology and it will take 10 years to do, and a lot of money. And they noticed that, given the academic ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem, open innovation models work much better for them than in order to just doing themselves, because obviously they have a specific set of capacities. They need to go in the interdisciplinarity that this requires. It's going to be too expensive for them to do. So I think that have shifted, and they have seen that it's better to the entrepreneurial world to carry some of the risk, and they get into okay, when a technology show promising elements that is going to give them a competitive advantage, and that competitive advantage is within sight, is the right moment for them to invest, to collaborate, to do joint agreements and things like that. So I think that it's a change of mindset in general on the industries, that they would like to see part of the risk being carried by academic world, part of the risk from in the entrepreneur world, because the size of the price is big enough to hedge some bets there. Um, and at the end of the day, some of these technologies, if you get them early enough, you are going to still be able to build a competitive advantage, or create defensibility around it. So I think that is kind of the word. And although we are early, some of the things are still early. The field in itself, it's getting into the 30-year kind of mark, so it's not like completely new. The thing is, they have been experimenting different things. They have been exploring. They have been failing in some areas. But there's a very interesting book. Probably won't agree with everything that is said there, but it's called The Coming Wave, and is written by Mustafa Soleiman, which is the writer, the creator of DeepMind. And basically he says that everything that surrounds us is either the biologic world or things that created by our intellect, our intelligence. And the two things are going to be disrupted by AI and synthetic biology. So we're coming at the crossroads of a major revolution that is going to change almost everything we know. Um, Probably he made it more in the case that it's going to everything go into a very bad place, but I think the opportunity is there now. It's very tangible. When you look at AlphaFold these days with Google, they're releasing models to the world that allows you to predict the shape of proteins and things that in the past were not available. So I think that the tools, the computational capacity, the speed to create new plasmids and make genetic engineering have changed dramatically. So it's very much within grasp to make really significant changes.
I think that there's another point to add. I mean, we've seen it with with AI recently. The Chinese AI DeepSeek, I think it is, seems to be almost as good as those developed in house inside these very large corporations. But I was reading something that the Chinese developers, in order to overcome the limitations placed on them, there was a lot of open source collaboration going on. And in doing that, they were able to achieve something very similar for a lot less and quite quickly. So I think that there's a lot to be said for collaborating across companies and being able to work with each other. I spoke to someone a while ago when we first started researching this, that were a very large corporation, and they said, we would rather work with 50 early stage tech startups who spread our risk. Hopefully, one of them comes off, than have 5 in-house projects that cost us a fortune and might not work. And I think that that's an increasingly adopted model from the very large companies of the world, and hopefully, it will benefit the very small companies of the world like us.
Yeah, and also if you look at the priorities in China, the UK innovation priorities, the long-term national plan where engineering biology is at one of the pillars, in the US as well. So everyone sees that this is going to eventually deliver solutions in many different verticals and many different areas of life. I'm just using the term in ways that this should impact everyday life. This is not some very far-fetched proxy of something that happens somewhere else. So I think there is a common agreement that this is important and this is going to create a relevant opportunity. The way it's going to happen and how fast it's going to happen and which is the first vertical that actually makes the tipping point, yeah, that we can argue about that. We have our beliefs. We have chosen this industry because we want to. It's not only because of the value, etc., but because it's a high engagement industry. Consumers engage emotionally, and when that happens, you can actually land your message, land the story on why this is important. If you are doing with this in a category that they have zero emotional engagement, it's harder to explain to them why this has been done in a different way. So in these high engagement categories, you get to say the story and you get to change the mindset of your target consumers, of the industry you're targeting. And that is important these days. It's not just the technology, but also getting consumers on board of it.
And I think when we talk to the general public about AI, the general public can understand several different things, and obviously AI breaks down into several different categories. But which is why I think it's so important the work that you're doing and startups like yourself, because you can see the tangible work that you're doing, which is enabled and driven by AI. So when somebody like Keir Starmer sets out, oh, I want the UK to be an AI powerhouse, or whatever he said it was, we're not talking about filters for Instagram or creating nice pictures. It's to drive forward industry and innovation in this country and every other country that's trying to do this. I think it brings it to life so much better. The value, like AI is raising emissions. So, Google's emissions have risen by 48%, and AI has driven that. And yet, if AI in the right place is used, it can supercharge the discovery, such as yours, which will then reduce or avoid emissions or capture emissions in the future if we use it in the right place. So it's never just is AI good or bad, or it depends what you're using for, just like any tool. And I think that's a key point that I do try to communicate to those of my friends who are not in this bubble.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's it's still very much on not there yet in terms of people understanding what we are talking about. And we understand just the bit that entails us. It's not where we understand the larger picture in some of these elements. But what we do know is this is a good tool to reduce time and reduce cost. And when you are racing against time and cost, that's the kind of tool you want to use, because that's the kind of problem we have. Obviously, there are things that needs to be sorted out, and I think obviously we need to try to explain more clearly how these things work in a way that people start familiarizing with them in a way that they can engage with it. But so far, I think the main important point is we try to do to do this faster and in a more cost-effective way. Therefore, the solution comes earlier to all of us. I think that's kind of what AI is allowing us to do.
What would you say to other founders considering following in your footsteps, particularly in the bioeconomy, about the journey, or where to look for a good idea, or what to know about the journey before they start it?
It's a good question. Obviously, when we came to Carbon13, we were sort of, I don't know if discouraged is the right word, but we were told not to get too hung up on ideas. It was meet people you can work with and then see what comes from it. As it happened, that worked well for Manu and I, and for our co-founder Andre at the time, who was interested in cyanobacteria. But I do think starting a company, especially a deep tech type company, can be rather stressful. You genuinely, and Carbon13 absolutely right. You need people who you can work well with, because you could very easily fall out with people, lose your patience, lose your cool on a regular basis. And it's finding people that you work well with will take you a lot further. Finding people with complementary skill sets is also kind of helpful. And the other thing I would say is make sure your family are on board with the idea.
Yeah.
I remember a few months ago, I saw an image and I put them, I don't know where, in some social media. that was telling something like, "We do this not because it's easy, but because we thought it would be easy." um,
I love that.
but it's hard. Obviously, there's no news. It's harder. I come from a lot of years in the corporate world. I'm not an entrepreneur by design, and I'm not young, so it's hard to learn my ropes later. But what I would say is, yes, it's harder. Uh, in the case of the bioeconomy, biology is not straightforward. It's not super easy to predict what is going to happen. So you need to consider that. You need to trust the process. You need to have a plan and a backup plan and a backup plan on that. And then you need to be very clear on why you are choosing what you do and why that remains relevant through time. Because at the moment that doesn't remain relevant, you need to change, and that's okay. But you need to change because you have thought on what you originally envisioned, and now that's not longer relevant, and that's not the time to change. So I think it's a very exciting field, particularly in the UK. There is amazing brains around this field. Across the board, many universities has really very clever people working on this, whether inside outside academia. So the uniqueness of this specific ecosystem is quite strong, and I believe it enables you to have probably the latest ideas, the latest technologies available, and you need to find what is the best way to put this at the use of humanity. But yeah, I love this field. If you tell me, and not because of the year and a half or more that we have been doing this, but if you tell me go into a more software led, I wouldn't be able to do it. That's my case. I feel there are probably people that are very passionate about. I think this is about atoms, no, not bytes. First of all, we need to just solve things that are materially in front of us, and I think you work with nature. So you work with the machineries that are already there that have been doing some things. I remember you mentioned at the very beginning the venture selfies. One of our original venture selfies, we were talking about cyanobacteria, making a big fuss about it. And part of the pitch was something along the lines of, the world in the future, if we don't do anything, is going to be hot, unstable, really catastrophic to some extent. That's the world that existed 3 billion years ago until cyanobacteria appeared, because when they appeared, they brought oxygen to the world and stabilized everything. So let's ask them to do it again.
Yeah, like for billions of years, planet Earth was rock. Uh, and it was bacteria, as you say, that created the atmosphere and created the possibility of life. It's as vital as
Yeah,
sunlight. Maybe Brian Cox would disagree with me, but it's played a much bigger role than I think. You wouldn't. I love reading about paleontology and things like that, and it does actually have some relevance to the startup ecosystem. Learning about dinosaurs. Final question as we come to the end of time. The message that you've just said, very powerful words just there. Are you a climate company?
yeah,
We are. We don't necessarily tell clients we're a climate company because that's not necessarily what they're looking for. But
I understand.
it is our primary driver. And we hope that by making products, as Manu said earlier, that are superior and hopefully cost effective, the fact that our primary driver is saving the planet becomes sort of a cherry on the cake for the clients rather than the main reason for their working with us.
yeah. I think it boils down to really seeing your vision through. So there is, for a very small company with 5 people, going against the big narratives of the world is going to be a waste of time. But we, as if you go to our website, still there. We use synthetic biology to regenerate the planet. That's it. We're trying to do that. How we're going to convince people to get on board, that will be very different depending who we're talking with. We just want them to get on board. If they are going to get on board because our technology is unique in terms of the functionality it deliver, or because it comes from the ocean, or because it's very climate positive, fine. But
Yeah.
therefore, our ultimate objective, we didn't came into this saying we think the chemical industry is not exciting enough. Let's do something different. We came into this basically because we thought we are going to get through this through entrepreneurship and through technology. We're going to change this by using our intellect as a species to get through that by creating a better world. One of the things that we hate in general is, okay, the proposition is, let's do all these efforts, and probably the world in the future is going to be slightly worse than it is today. No one is going to come into that narrative. It's not exciting. We need to create, not just promise, but create a world that is going to be significantly better than the world it is today. And I think we have the technologies and the potential to do it. And that's the journey we want to walk with.
I think you've described optimism and the adage, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right, but on a human species level. Exactly. Okay, guys, thank you so much for talking to me. I think during the course of this conversation, I think we've discovered that climate takes synthetic biology because climate takes life on Earth. Climate will take the beauty industry, it will take the pharma industry, it will take chemicals. And I think it's going to take optimism as well. And I'll leave that on your message. We have several other episodes of Climate Take, which are out right now. Everything from looking at materials all the way to the venture builder model itself. You can subscribe and find those on podcast platforms on our website, as well as Apple and Spotify. And if you are interested in building or investing or mentoring or working for climate tech startups of the caliber of Deep Blue Biotech, please do reach out. We're a friendly community. We're delighted to talk to you. Once again, thank you, Manu and Tim, for talking to me.
Thanks very much, Sarah.